The horn you hear is not your own. That single sound tells you everything has already been decided. You are King Ella of Northumbria, and the strange blasts echoing through your stone hall are nothing like the clean notes your men blow during ceremonies. These are harsh, foreign, wrong. Your hand moves to your sword, but you don't draw it. Not yet. A king cannot show panic, even when his heart is hammering against his ribs. The door crashes open. Your captain stumbles in, his face white beneath his helmet. He's fought in a dozen battles without flinching. You've never seen fear in his eyes before. The Danes, he says, at the gates. The warmth drains from the room, not raiding some distant village, not burning monasteries on the coast, here, at York, at the centre of everything you rule. You've met them before, 4 years ago, maybe 5. A Danish warlord washed up after a storm, arrogant even in chains. Ragnar, they called him. You'd thrown him into the old snake pit beneath the city, a fitting end for a pirate, you thought. You remember watching through the iron grate as the vipers struck, how he sang even as he died. His voice had been strong for a dying man. Your advisors called it justice. You called it Tuesday and moved on. But now, as smoke creeps through the windows and shouts fill the courtyard, a cold truth settles in your chest. That pirate had sons. And sons remember. Your men are forming ranks. Your steward rushes to secure the treasury. Your wife, thank God you sent her north 3 days ago with the children. At least they're safe. At least they won't see what's coming. You pull on your armor, feeling each ring of mail settle into place. The weight is familiar, comforting. You've worn it in skirmishes that seemed desperate at the time, but were really just organized fights between neighbors. This feels different. The silence between the shouts, the way your men's hands shake. Everyone senses it. You walk toward the courtyard, forcing your face into the mask of confidence a king must wear. Your men need to see strength. They need to believe victory is certain, even if you don't. The gates are splintering when you arrive. Not from a battering ram from axes, dozens of them, striking in rhythm like a heartbeat. Your archers fire from the walls, but for every Dane that falls, 2 more appear. The smoke thickens. They've set fire to the outer buildings. They're not here to occupy. They're here to erase. You draw your sword and raise it high, for Northumbria, for God and King. Your men echo the cry, but it sounds thin against the roar beyond the gates. The wood breaks with a sound like snapping bones, and they pour through hundreds of round shields and gleaming axes and faces painted with ash. You charge because that's what kings do. The first wave hits, and for a few desperate minutes it's chaos, steel on steel, grunts of effort, screams. You feel each impact travel up your arm. Blood splashes your face, yours or someone else's, you can't tell. But there are too many. They keep coming like a flood. Your captain falls first, a spear through his throat. Your marshal goes down next. The circle of guards around you shrinks until you can barely move without hitting your own men. Something strikes the back of your knee. You crash into the mud. Your sword is torn from your grip. Strong hands wrench your arms behind your back. The crown, your father's crown, is ripped from your head. You see it arc through the firelight before it lands in the mud and disappears under boots. They haul you upright. He walks with a strange rolling gait, leaning on a staff of iron. His body twists in ways that should make movement impossible. His face is young, but his eyes are ancient and empty of warmth. Ivar, Ragnar's son. He stops 3 paces away, studying you like an insect pinned to a board. The battle rages around you, but in this small space, everything goes quiet. You, he says, in clear but accented English, you fed my father to the snakes. You try to speak, to explain, to defend, but your throat closes. No words come. His lips curl into something that might be a smile, if smiles could carry such perfect hatred. Good, he says softly. Then, we understand each other. He turns and walks away. You're dragged stumbling after him through the ruins of your city, past bodies of men who died believing in your protection, past burning buildings that once meant power. The rope cuts your wrists, your knee throbs. But worse than any pain is the understanding settling over you like a burial shroud. This isn't a battle anymore. They strip your armor in stages, and somehow that makes it worse than if they'd torn everything off at once. First, the mail coat, lifted over your head, then the leather beneath, unlaced and pulled from your shoulders. Your tunic comes next, leaving only the thin linen undergarment that feels impossibly fragile against the cold wind. You're shivering now, though whether from cold or fear you can't say. The rope is replaced with iron manacles connected by a short chain. A longer chain loops around your neck, and the casual way they do it, like your livestock, makes bile rise in your throat. You're standing in York's central square, your city, except it doesn't feel like yours anymore. Danish shields lean against walls, their fires burn in the streets. Some of your people watch from doorways, too frightened to flee. You try to meet their eyes, to offer reassurance, but they look away. One woman, the baker's wife, you've bought bread from her 100 times, spits on the ground as you pass. That small betrayal cuts deeper than you expect. They parade you through every street where someone might witness. The chain around your neck is held by a boy who can't be more than 16. He yanks it to watch you stumble. The warriors laugh each time you fall, but there's no anger in it, just casual amusement. You're not a threat, you're entertainment. In the marketplace stands a wooden platform built from church doors. They force you up the steps and tie your hands to a post in the centre. The crowd gathering is mixed Danish warriors, eager for a show, your own people, hollow with shock. Ivar climbs the platform with his lurching gait. He doesn't look at you. Instead, he surveys the crowd, letting silence stretch until it chokes. This man, he finally says, his voice carrying across the square, believed walls made him safe, believed his God made him righteous, believed he could kill without consequence. He turns to you now, his expression almost gentle. That makes it worse. He was mistaken. The shears come without warning, the kind used for sheep. They hack through your hair in rough chunks, not bothering with care. You feel cold metal against your scalp, the tug and pull, warm blood where they cut too deep. In minutes, you're left with nothing but a bleeding, patchy mess. You don't know it yet, but this is the mark of a thrall, a slave, the lowest position in their world. They're not removing your hair, they're removing everything that made you a king. Someone brings a whip. You've seen floggings, ordered them, even, 10 lashes for thieves, 15 for deserters. You'd thought yourself merciful, you never imagined what it felt like. The first strike is liquid fire across your shoulders. Your body jerks against the ropes. The second crosses the first, and you feel skin split. By the third, you're biting your lip until it bleeds, determined not to scream. That determination lasts until the 7th. Then you're screaming and you can't stop. The Danes laugh as if watching a mildly amusing performance. Some of your people cry, most just stare with hollow eyes. When it stops, you've lost count of how many they leave you tied to the post. Blood runs down your back in warm streams. Your head hangs forward, and through the haze of pain, you see Ivar still standing at the platform's edge. He's not watching you anymore. He's watching your people. Tomorrow, he announces, we go to the sacred grove. The crowd murmurs. Even some of the Danes look uneasy. You don't understand why until an older warrior near the front makes a gesture, fingers spread like wings. Your vision blurs. The sun sets. The cold creeps in. They give you no food, no water, just pain and shame, and the knowledge settling like stone in your gut. Tomorrow will be worse. They untie you at dawn, and the mercy of it is worse than the cruelty, because mercy means they're not finished yet. Your back is a landscape of torn flesh and dried blood. Every breath sends fresh pain down your spine, They don't give you time to stand properly, the chain yanks forward, and you stumble after it like a dog. Your bare feet slip on the cold stone as they drag you through the camp, past rows of tents where warriors are waking, past fire pits where breakfast cooks, toward the tree line at the city's edge. The forest is older than your kingdom, older than the Romans who built the walls you once thought protected you. The trees are twisted, their branches reaching skyward like gnarled fingers. In the center stands an oak so massive it would take 10 men to encircle it. The trunk is carved with symbols you don't recognize, lines and curves that seem to writhe in the early morning light. Beneath the oak sits a stone altar, its surface dark with stains you don't want to identify. Ivar is already there, seated in a carved wooden chair that's somehow more threatening than any throne you've ever seen. His brothers flank him Ubi, broad and silent. Kvitsirk, younger, watching you with something that might be curiosity or pity. Bjorn, the oldest, his face like granite. Behind them, a fire burns. Beside the fire, iron tools are laid out in neat rows. Blades, hooks, things without names. They force you to your knees in the dirt before the altar. You have a choice, Ivar says, and his voice is almost kind, almost reasonable. That's the part that terrifies you most, the gentleness of it. You can renounce your God, swear to ours, accept baptism in our way. You would live as a thrall, yes, the lowest position, but you would live. He pauses, letting the word settle. Or you can die as a king. You know what he means. You've heard the stories whispered by traders and monks. The blood eagle, a ritual execution so brutal that even hardened warriors speak of it in hushed tones. Your ribs split from your spine, your lungs pulled through the opening like wings, an offering to their god, the one they call the Allfather. Some claim it's just a story, a tale meant to frighten children and break the will of enemies before battles begin. But looking at Ivar's face calm, patient, utterly certain you know it's real. You know he's done this before. You know he'll do it again. What will it be, King Ella? He asks softly. The forest is silent around you. Even the birds have stopped singing. Behind you, Danish warriors form a circle, but they're not jeering anymore. This isn't entertainment. This is something else. Something sacred to them, profane to you. You think of your father, placing the crown on your head. You think of the oaths you swore before God and your people. You think of your wife's face, your children's laughter, the hall where you held court and dispensed justice and truly believed that right and wrong were clear and simple things. You think of Ragnar singing in the snake pit, defiant even as venom coursed through his veins. And you understand, with a clarity that feels like ice water in your chest, that this moment was always coming. From the second you ordered that pit opened, from the second you watched a father die and felt nothing but satisfaction, you sealed your own fate. Not because the gods demand balance you don't believe in their gods, but because sons remember, because violence breeds violence, because the world is not just or fair or governed by divine providence. It's governed by men with long memories and sharp blades. You lift your head. Your voice comes out steadier than you expected. I am a Christian king, you say. I will not bow to demons. For a long moment, Ivar just looks at you. Then he nods, slow and deliberate, as if you've confirmed something he already knew. Then you will be remembered, he says. He gestures to his men. They move toward you, and the choice you just made, the only choice that lets you keep some fragment of who you were, becomes the choice that seals what you will become. A warning, a story, a ghost that will haunt battlefields for generations. The hands that grip your arms are not rough, they're almost gentle as they guide you toward the altar, as if this is a favor they're doing you, as if martyrdom is a gift. They lay you face down on the stone, and the cold of it against your chest is the last ordinary sensation you will ever feel. Your arms are stretched wide. wrists bound to iron rings set deep in the rock. Your legs are secured the same way. You cannot move, cannot turn your head more than a few inches, cannot do anything but press your cheek against stone that's been smoothed by centuries of weather and use and things you don't want to imagine. The surface is covered in runes carved deep, filled with something dark that might be old blood or pitch, or both. You can feel them under your skin, rough and deliberate, spelling out words in a language you've never learned. Around you, the Danes form a circle. But this isn't the mob from yesterday's marketplace. These men are silent, reverent. Some have stripped to the waist despite the cold. Others have painted their faces with ash in patterns that suggest ritual, not war. This is a congregation, a ceremony. You are not a prisoner being executed. You are a sacrifice being offered. The chanting starts low, so low you feel it more than hear it, a rhythmic pulse that seems to come from the earth itself. Words in Old Norse that roll and break like waves. The rhythm matches your heartbeat at first, then overtakes it, until you're not sure if your heart is following the chant or the chant is following your heart. Ivar appears at the edge of your vision. He's holding a blade long, curved, the metal dark with age, not iron, bronze maybe, or something older. The kind of weapon that belongs in a grave, not in living hands. We offer this life to the All-Father, he says, and his voice cuts through the chanting without rising in volume. We give him the breath of a king, the blood of our enemy, the wings of vengeance made flesh. The chanting grows louder. Drums join in deep, resonant thuds that you feel in your bones. Ivar kneels beside you, close enough that you can smell wood smoke on his clothes, salt in his hair, something else underneath herbs maybe, or incense. His face is inches from yours. You should have let him die with honor, he whispers, so quiet only you can hear. You should have given him a warrior's death, a clean blade, a quick end. Instead, you made a spectacle of his suffering. He pauses, and for just a moment, something flickers in his eyes. Not mercy, not regret, just acknowledgement of what's about to happen. Now you die with our honor, he says, and your suffering becomes our offering. The first cut is along your spine, just below the neck. The pain is unlike anything your mind has words for. It's not sharp or dull or burning or throbbing. It's all of those and none of them. It's white and absolute, and it fills every corner of your awareness until there's no room for thought or prayer or even fear. Just pain, pure and total and infinite. You scream, but the sound is swallowed by the chanting, the drums, the roar of the fire. The blade moves lower, following the line of your spine with careful precision. Whoever is doing this, Ivar, or someone else, you can't tell anymore, can't see, can't focus, knows anatomy. Knows exactly where to cut to avoid the major vessels, to keep you conscious, to make this last. You feel your ribs being separated from your spine, not broken separated, pried apart with something metal, something that creaks and groans like a door being opened. The sound of it is worse than the pain, somehow, wet and organic and fundamentally wrong. Your mind fractures. Part of you is still on the altar, still feeling everything. Another part has fled somewhere else back to your hall, to your wedding day, to the first time you held your newborn daughter and felt the weight of absolute love and absolute terror that comes with protecting something so fragile. You feel hands inside your body, moving with purpose, reaching. A monk once told you that the soul resides in the lungs. That breath is what makes us alive, what separates us from clay and dust. You'd thought it superstition, poetry. But now, as you feel your lungs being grasped, being pulled, being drawn out through the opening in your back, you understand what he meant. This isn't just killing you, it's unmaking you. The pain reaches a peak that shouldn't be survivable, and then mercifully, impossibly, it begins to fade. Not because the pain lessens, but because your body simply runs out of the capacity to process it. Like a bucket filled past overflowing, there's nowhere for the sensation to go. Your vision dims at the edges. The chanting becomes distant, muffled, as if you're hearing it through water. The drums slow, or maybe that's your heartbeat finally giving out. You think of your children. You hope they never learn the details of this. You hope they're told you died in battle, sword in hand, defiant to the end. You hope they never know you spent your final moments as a piece of religious theatre for people who worship gods you don't believe in. You think of Ragnar again, of his song. You wonder if he felt this same strange dissolution of self, this sense of becoming less solid, less real, less there with each passing second. You wonder if he's waiting for you somewhere in the dark, ready to mock you for ending up exactly where he did. The thought almost makes you laugh, but you don't have the breath for it anymore. The darkness grows. The pain recedes into something distant and abstract. You feel the altar beneath you, the stone still cold, still solid, even as everything else dissolves. Your last thought is not profound. It's not a prayer or a curse or a declaration. It's simple and small and utterly human. I don't want to go. But wanting has nothing to do with it. The darkness takes you gently, almost kindly, and the last thing you hear is the chanting reaching its crescendo, a sound of triumph and sorrow and ancient hunger, finally satisfied. Then silence. Then nothing. Then the story begins. Your body remains on display for 3 days, and in those 3 days, you become something more powerful than you ever were in life. You become a message written in flesh and bone. They don't bury you. They don't burn you. They leave you tied to the altar with what was once inside you, now spread behind you in a grotesque parody of wings. The spring sun beats down. The rain comes and goes. Birds circle overhead ravens, mostly drawn by the scent. By the second day, the forest creatures grow bold. By the third, you're barely recognizable as something that was once human. But that's the point. A rider arrives at the court of King Ethelred in Wessex on the 4th day. He's one of yours, a scout who fled York during the battle, who watched from the forest as they killed you. He kneels before Ethelred's throne and delivers his report in a voice that shakes despite his best efforts to control it. The Danes have taken York, my lord. King Ella is dead. Ethelred leans forward. He's younger than you were, barely 30, with a warrior's build and a scholar's eyes. How did he die? The scout hesitates. His hands clench and unclench at his sides. They gave him the blood eagle, my lord. The hall goes silent. Even the servants stop their work. Everyone knows the term, though most have dismissed it as legend, as exaggeration, as the kind of story old warriors tell to impress younger men around campfires. Describe it, Ethelred says quietly. The scout does. Every detail he witnessed from his hiding place in the trees, the altar, the blade, the careful, methodical way they took you apart. When he finishes, several of Ethelred's dungs have gone pale. One excuses himself and doesn't return. Ethelred sits back in his throne, his face unreadable. Send word to Mercia, he says finally. Tell King Burgred what has happened. Tell him we must unite, or we will fall separately. Tell him, he pauses, choosing his words carefully. Tell him the Danes are not raiders anymore. They are conquerors, and they are willing to do anything to break our will. In Mercia, Burgred receives the news while inspecting his northern defences. He's an old man, grey-bearded and battle-scarred, who has spent 40 years fighting off Welsh raids and border disputes. He listens to the messenger's account with growing horror. Double the watch, he orders his marshal. No one travels alone. No one goes more than a mile from the fortress walls. And send riders to every village, every monastery, every manor house. Tell them what happened to Ella. Tell them what awaits anyone the Danes capture. The message spreads like wildfire across Britain. In monasteries, monks who once believed their religious devotion would protect them now flee inland, abandoning centuries-old foundations. In villages, families pack what they can carry and move south, away from the coasts, away from the rivers. In manor halls, the Chiens, who once dismissed Viking raids as mere nuisances, now demand their lords provide protection, threaten rebellion if none comes. Your death has done what a dozen battles could not. It has unified fear. It has made the threat real and immediate and impossible to ignore. The great heathen army moves south from York, and they move through a landscape already broken by terror. Town after town surrenders without a fight. The gates open before the first axe strikes wood. Leaders kneel and offer tribute, silver, grain, horses, hostages, anything to avoid what happened to you. In East Anglia, King Edmund receives them with full ceremony. He's a devout man, beloved by his people, known for his justice and charity. He offers the Danes land, supplies, safe passage. Anything they want. They take it all. Then they take him too. The account of what happens next is recorded by monks who witness it from hiding. Edmund refuses to renounce his faith, just as you did. But the Danes have learned from your death. They've seen how effective theatre can be, so they try something different. They tie Edmund to a tree at the edge of his own capital. Then they turn it into a game. Warriors take turns shooting arrows, aiming not to kill but to wound, to prolong, to make a spectacle. The monks write that Edmund prayed throughout, that he called on God to forgive his killers even as the arrows found their marks. By the end, he looks like a pincushion, the tree behind him dark with blood. The monks call him a saint, a martyr. They write that miracles occurred at the site of his death. But the political effect is the same as yours: surrender, submission, the collapse of resistance. Ivar the Boneless becomes Ivar the Terrible. His reputation spreads far beyond Britain. Arab traders carry tales of him down the Volga. Byzantine diplomats record his name in their chronicles. He becomes the monster parents use to frighten misbehaving children, the threat commanders use to motivate terrified soldiers. And always, always, the stories come back to you, to the king who thought walls protected him, to the man who killed Ragnar and paid for it with the most agonizing death imaginable. Your name becomes a cautionary tale, a warning, a ghost story that's all the more terrifying because it's true. In Iceland, a poet composes a saga about Ragnar's sons. The climax is your death, described in vivid, unflinching detail. The saga is performed in halls across Scandinavia, and each time the poet reaches the blood eagle scene, the audience falls silent, not from boredom or disinterest, but from a kind of horrified fascination. Because everyone understands what the story really means. It's not about revenge, not really. It's about power, about what happens when you underestimate your enemies, about the price of hubris, about how a single brutal act can reshape the political landscape of an entire region. Your death becomes more valuable to the Danes than your kingdom ever was. They trade on it, leverage it, use it to extract concessions, and surrender without ever drawing a sword. The mere threat of suffering what you suffered is enough to break the will of kings and generals and warlords. In this way, you serve them better in death than you ever served your own people in life. You become their weapon, their hammer, their most effective tool of conquest. And the terrible truth, the one that haunts the halls of power across Britain, is that it works. It works so well that within a generation, the Danes control half the island. They call it the Danelaw, and it exists because of fear, because of stories, because of you. Your wife dies 2 years later, though whether from illness or grief or something else, the records don't say. Your children are raised by monks in a monastery in Wessex, their royal heritage, a source of danger rather than pride. They take religious names, live quiet lives, die forgotten. Your kingdom becomes a Danish settlement. Your hall is torn down, the stones used to build a Norse temple. Your name survives only in the sagas of your enemies, spoken with mockery and triumph. This is the legacy of kings who fall to the Vikings. Not honor, not remembrance, just utility, just a story told to break the will of the next target. Centuries pass, and your name endures, but not in the way anyone endures by choice. You are not Ella the Just, you are the king who was given wings. The blood eagle itself becomes legend, wrapped in history, wrapped in horror. Scholars will spend lifetimes debating whether it truly happened, or whether it was invented by later writers to add drama to an already brutal age. They'll examine the medical feasibility, whether a human could survive the procedure long enough for it to be completed, whether the anatomical descriptions in the sagas match what such a ritual would actually require. Some will argue it's impossible, that no one could remain conscious through such trauma, that the accounts must be exaggerated or entirely fictional. Others will point to the consistent details across multiple independent sources, to the archaeological evidence of similar ritual killings in Norse grave sites, to the simple cold logic that terror works best when it's real. But here's what the scholars miss in their debates about authenticity. It doesn't matter if every detail is accurate. What matters is that people believed it. Kings believed it. Armies believed it. And that belief reshaped the world. The Vikings understood something that modern people often forget. Power is not just about what you do, it's about what others think you might do. It's about perception and fear, and the stories that spread in the dark hours before battle. Your death was theatre. Deliberate, calculated, designed to maximize psychological impact, and it worked perfectly. Because you were not the only one, you were just the most famous. King Edmund of East Anglia, shot full of arrows and left to die slowly. Irish chieftains drowned in sacred bogs as offerings to gods they didn't believe in. Scottish nobles burned alive in their own halls, the doors barred from outside. Pictish princes thrown from cliffs onto rocks below, while their people watched helplessly. The pattern repeats across territories and decades. Captured rulers subjected to deaths that are public, prolonged, and pregnant with symbolism. Deaths designed not just to kill, but to communicate, to terrorize, to break the will of anyone who might consider resistance. It's a system, carefully constructed and ruthlessly maintained. One spectacular execution prevents a dozen battles. One king's torture saves thousands of Danish lives. The math is brutal but effective. And it works until it doesn't. Because empires built on fear discover the same truth over and over throughout history. Terror is powerful, but it's not infinite. It's not permanent. Eventually, the people you're trying to frighten learn that there are worse things than death. They learn that submission guarantees nothing. They learn that fighting back, even against impossible odds, at least offers the dignity of defiance. King Alfred of Wessex learns this lesson. He's a young man when you die, not yet the ruler he will become, but he's paying attention. He watches how the Danes use fear, how they trade on reputation, how they've built an empire on the calculated brutality of men like Ivar. And he realizes something crucial. If the Danes' power rests on the belief that they're invincible, then that belief can be broken. At Edington, Alfred meets the great heathen army in open battle. His forces are outnumbered, outmatched in experience, facing warriors who have conquered half of Britain. By every reasonable measure, he should lose. But he doesn't flee, doesn't surrender, doesn't send emissaries offering tribute and begging for mercy. He fights, and when the sun sets, the Danes are the ones retreating. The psychological shift is immediate. The invincible monsters bleed like anyone else. The unstoppable army can be stopped. The fear that has gripped Britain for decades begins to crack. The Danes sue for peace. They accept baptism. They agree to borders, not because they've lost their capacity for violence, they haven't, but because the weapon of terror has dulled through overuse, and without it, they're just men with axes. Ivar dies old and wealthy, his sons and grandsons ruling territories across the Norse world. He never suffers the kind of death he inflicted on you, There's no poetic justice, no divine retribution. He dies in his bed, surrounded by family, remembered as a great warrior and brilliant tactician. But his empire fragments within a generation, the Danelaw shrinks, the settlements become absorbed into Anglo-Saxon culture, Danish and English bloodlines, mixing until the distinction becomes meaningless. Your death, which seemed so significant, which reshaped kingdoms and broke armies, becomes a footnote, a story, a historical curiosity. Modern archaeologists will dig up Norse grave sites and find evidence of ritual violence. Historians will publish papers debating the Blood Eagle's authenticity. Documentary makers will create dramatic reenactments, trying to capture the horror for audiences who can barely imagine such brutality. But the real lesson, the one that echoes through every century since, is simpler and more disturbing. Humans are endlessly creative in how they hurt each other. When violence serves a purpose, when it advances political goals or reinforces power structures, societies find ways to justify it, systematize it, make it normal. The guillotines of revolutionary France, designed to make execution efficient and egalitarian. The show trials of totalitarian regimes, where confession and execution become public performance. The carefully documented tortures of modern intelligence agencies, justified as necessary for security. The methods change, the technology evolves, but the underlying logic remains constant. Make the punishment spectacular, make it public, make it a warning. Use one person's suffering to control thousands. Your death was not unique, it was a template. And if you listen carefully in the places where power operates without oversight, where decisions about life and death are made behind closed doors, where the strong decide the fate of the weak, you can still hear echoes of that ancient grove. The chanting, the drums, the calculated breaking of a human being to serve a political purpose. The Vikings didn't invent cruelty. They just understood how to weaponize it, how to turn individual suffering into collective fear, how to make death serve the living. That knowledge never disappeared. It just changed costumes, updated its methods, found new justifications. The horned helmets are gone, the longships are museum pieces, the sacred groves are tourist attractions. But the logic that put you on that altar, the cold calculation that one person's agony can reshape the behavior of thousands that logic endures. It endures in every society that uses punishment as theatre, in every regime that makes examples of dissidents, in every power structure that relies on fear to maintain control. You died 1,000 years ago, but the system that killed you never did. It just learned to hide itself better. To use language like deterrence and necessary force and the greater good. The altar is still there, if you know where to look. The blade is still sharp, the audience is still watching. And somewhere, someone is making the same calculation Ivar made, deciding that one person's horror can serve a useful purpose. That suffering, properly applied, is just another tool of statecraft. Your wings have long since turned to dust, but the shadow they cast stretches across centuries, dark and cold and infinitely long. This is what Vikings did to captured kings. This is what power does to anyone who stands in its way. And this is why we remember, not to celebrate or condemn, but to recognize the pattern, to see how easily humans transform suffering into strategy, cruelty into policy, death into message. The grove is quiet now. The oak still stands. The stone altar, worn smooth by weather and time, reveals nothing of what it witnessed. But the lesson remains, carved deeper than any rune. Power demands spectacle. Fear requires theatre. And someone, always, will pay the price of admission.